Welcome back. When in such a short time and in such extreme circumstances like the ones to which Trump is submitting us, Schumer gives his vote to a continuing resolution that gives Trump powers over the budget that only Orban has, and then comes with a ridiculous statement that if Trump doesn't behave, he's going to send him a strong letter. Then my question is, who is advising the Democratic Party? Because their main problem is that they are seen as weak, and these the latest developments make them not just weak, make them not just look weak, but also laughable. Consider that his vote for the continuing resolution is not a small thing. It gave Trump enough leeway to move funds among appropriations regardless of the amounts approved by Congress. And this just before the website that track apportionments, which is the amount of money assigned to those appropriations, just oops, went down. And then comes Schumer with his strong letter statement. So if you believe the Democratic Party is going to save us, you are wrong. Before they save us, we have to save them. Schumer is more a symptom than a cause of the detachment between Democrats and their voters and the Democratic Party. A party that in the last decade has become the party that only wins elections when it doesn't lose them despite their best effort. The party of strategists that have not that can't fathom a concept of political marketing even in their dreams. The party that loses gracefully on policy even when it wins elections, as it happened with Biden. The party that hides weakness under the excuse of bipartisanship. Maybe that's the reason why Latinos and the working class have been so reluctant to recoil in their support for Trump. And even now, only 2% of Trump voters regret their vote, even after declaring that Trump has gone too far on immigration and the uncertainty on the economy. It has reached levels not seen even and not even under Biden. Even after the levels of income uncertainty that alienating them from Biden have grown to even higher levels. And something Democrats seem unable to understand is that the working class is more prone to forgive the lives of politicians than their weakness. And that after a while, they wonder if somebody can be so detached or weak unless that somebody is part of the same game of corruption that they despise. And yes, this is not an only local phenomenon. Scholars like Thomas Piketty and Farid Zakaria have understood that social democrat parties, like the Democratic Party, have become the party of the educated, who have displaced the working class from their base precisely when globalization and xenophobia fuel far-right parties and movements and even let them expand their base with subgroups like the anti-vax. And yet, the leaders of the Democratic Party and their court of strategists have been unable to prepare a strategy, a strategy to tackle this movement, to present a counter proposal. Worse, they have just outsourced social issues to the identity left. That comes from their educated new base. Uh, just you just have to see how the damage abolished ICE has caused to immigration, or the fund the police has caused to criminal just to the reform of the criminal justice system. And then the Democratic parties answer when these the little mischiefs of the woke movement is made manifesto, is to throw immigrants, minorities, and transsexual people under the bus when their cowardice and ineptitude came back to bite them, which is when Republicans use those cultural issues to corner moderate Democrats in recent elections, as it happened with the Defund the Police. In most cases, the working class, Latinos, and blacks among them don't follow the intricacies of foreign policy, especially when in mass media it's rare to find somebody who can help them connect the dots. Consider just what we have mentioned in another video, how the people cannot connect Russia and China because the media itself doesn't connect China and Russia and treat them as completely different and unconnected issues. That's why important issues like the effects of Trump's chaotic foreign policy on our access to rare earths and minerals, with each is extremely important in our future, because that will affect the evolution of American manufacturing, because it's those precisely access to those minerals and rare earth what will make the manufacturing revolution of the future possible, are not appealing and are not appealing because people don't connect them to their own futures. And because of the mediocrity of mass media, people cannot see the effects of Trump's trade, in this case tariffs, and foreign policies, the effects of these policies in their own lives, until they feel personally the effects of those policies on the supply chains, which translated to the lives of the working classes, the layoffs, or the higher prices, or both. For this same reason, the voters and the working class can realize up to what point are those policies, whether those policies are reversible or not, at least up to what point they can be reversed before they have inflicted significant damage in their lives. And that brings again back the question: if the people are not connecting the dots, if the media is not helping them, then why is the Democratic Party not helping them to connect those dots? What brings me to my original question: who is advising the Democratic Party? Do you remember in 2020, when, thanks to Trump's terrible mishandling of the pandemic, people died in the thousands, and many people lost their livelihoods, because they lost their homes, they lost their income, and both were the result of the same irresponsible policies, Trump's mishandling of the pandemic. And yet, when the in the exit polls, people still found were much more generous with Trump's performance on the economy than on the pandemic as a health issue. Why is that? Because Democrats were so inept that they couldn't help the voters connect the dots. So they couldn't, voters still could not see the economy as the pandemic as an economic issue. They could not connect Trump's policies to the economic hardship they had gone through as a result of the pandemic. They just could see the pandemic as a health issue, and it was the job of the Democratic Party to do so. And you may say, well, Biden won. What's the problem? The problem was that down the ticket, the many Republicans stay loyal to their party. And in the state races, that made possible another decade of gerrymandering because the, the state races stayed remained in favor of the Republican Party, and that caused a lot of harm and lots of obstruction. So it's important. And again, who was in charge of those decisions? Jennifer O'Malley Dillon. I actually remember how one journalist asked the Biden campaign if the people could connect both the economic and health dimension of the pandemic, and they were very confident in saying that yes, yes. And even though at the moment you could try to find a correlation between those numbers in the pages, or there was enough data in the pages of Real Clear Politics, and you could see that they were not correlated. But according to the Biden campaign, they did. Result, another decade of gerrymandering. So my question is, who is advising the Democratic Party? Thanks to Biden's inaction, the working class became aware of the effects on inflation. As soon they will be acquainted with the effects of tariffs on income. Whether the biggest damage is on inflation or on the supply chains, the on employment, that will depend on how tight the labor market is by then. But regardless of whether that damage can be reversed, especially when they, as a small business, have less pricing power or no pricing power, are normally less informed and are facing higher interest rates. The question is how these working class, these small businesses are going to connect the dots. Are they going to connect them the way they connect them, or did fail to connect them after the pandemic in 2020, or are they properly connect them to Trump's policies? If you were a real strategist, you will be making sure that people could connect the dots, not that Jennifer O'Malley Dillon that happily said that people were connecting the dots, even though the data she could have found in Real Clear Politics, public information, is clearly stated the opposite. And it's precisely because they are less informed, the most vulnerable groups, small businesses, working class, that they don't give credit many times to their instincts and keep spending or borrowing when they should be saving to create a safety net until it's too late. Uh, for the same reason that they are lower information voters, is that they are normally don't see don't are fail they normally fail to calculate or have an idea of the effects of China's retaliation on their own well-being. So you would say that Democrats should be inclined to use the upcoming effects of tariffs and deportations, especially of tariffs, to help voters connect the dots, capitalize on the working classes discontent, and offer them alternatives, because you cannot just say that Trump is bad or that the water is wet. You have to offer alternatives. But no, instead they keep playing dead, and when they finally open their mouth, they do idiotic things like jumping on isolated GDP numbers that, in the best case, represents the attempts of the best informed economic agents to anticipate to the effects of tariffs. Economic agents may be companies or consumers, and that may have been just an increase in imports before the price of these imports rose as a result of the tariffs. Or at worst, this may be statistical noise that will be revised later and affect their already weak credibility. Remember that only about 40%, despite all the mayhem created by Trump, only about 40% believe they can do better on the economy. Democrats, I mean. So instead of jumping on the uncertainty on income, which is the current salient issue, already seen in the poll, because we have already seen in the polls and surveys prepared by, for instance, the New York Fed, they jump on an isolated number about GDP, which may have been affected by episodic levels of imports in a process that is more difficult to understand by the average voter. Therefore, the question worth asking is, who is advising these people? I mean, these people in the DNC and the Democratic leadership. What kind of clown is misleading them into falling into making the assets of themselves? How can a pollster or the strategy be so bad and still be sought for guidance when, in their own words, Trump represents a grave danger to our democracy and our economy? If the current leadership in the Democratic Party feels uncomfortable with the legacy of FDR, the same FDR who was a hero of the working class and was elected 4 times, when they will not able to keep the White House for more than one term, even after Trump beats them with pretty much the same playbook in 2016. If they are so uncomfortable with FDR, they still have a pretty decent one narrative, which is the Clinton's government narrative that Al Gore crystallized in reimagining government. But even at times when Dodge is dismantling the concept of government, a government that shone in the times of icons like FDR and JFK, even when Obama, even when since Obama trust in government is at historic lows, remember that different from Republicans, if you are a Democrat, you need government to work and to be trusted. Even despite all these considerations, they they prefer to keep playing dead to counter Dodge's narrative with at least a Clinton narrative. They just say nothing. Yes, there are isolated voices, but pretty much those isolated voices are not proposing anything. They just are saying that Trump is not cool, as if saying that Trump is not cool had worked great in 2024. And then when they don't look weak or laughable, they are silent. Just let me repeat it once more. Consider that with Schumer's vote, a continuing resolution was that allowed Trump to ignore Congress's appropriation passed, and just after that, the website that tracked the use of those appropriations, what is known as apportionment, just went down. And Democrats have not said a word. Why? Because they are always afraid of the embarrassment. And even then, they should learn from FDR. If you are wrong, admit it frankly and try something new. Was this the result of ineptitude, or Schumer really believed that Trump was going to use this extra power judiciously and with transparency? Remember that I have mentioned before, this is a kind of power only autocrats like Orban have. And maybe the worst is that not even after the fact, Schumer faced voters to admit that he got screwed up, or just because he didn't want to admit that he was in fact trusting that voters were so stupid that they would soon forget his unfortunate vote, or maybe to hide the negligence of some staffer. Nothing, no accountability, no admission of error, nothing, just condescending silence. And in the worst moment, when Trump decides to ignore even course decisions and keeps trying to tame our civil society, from academia to the media, when the Democratic Party's leadership is needed the most, they play dead. It's clear that the civil society can trust the Democratic Party, that it will have to save it from itself to prevent the catastrophic search of a third party to fill the void. But anyway, the question persists: who is advising these people? And having made this question, let me leave you with our newscast.
Good evening. This is Brian Thomas Simons, and these are the main headlines of this hour. Among other news,
New 166 executive decisions were released in the Oval Office during the weekend. Among them, 1. State Secretary Rubio won't be referred to as Secretary Little Marco or Lil Marco in official White House communications. At the Oval Office presentation, President Trump admitted this was the fourth time an executive decision was issued about this topic at the insistence of the state secretary, but that he couldn't help himself. 2. From now on, Canada and Greenland will be admitted not as states but as territories of the United States. The diminished status was explained by the last Canadian elections and polls in Greenland that implied hostility to the annexation. Asked about the reactions of Canada and Denmark to his decision, President Trump said that it was all Biden's fault. 3. Secretary Little Marco will stay in the Maldives until further notice, but will remain in competition in The Apprentice, White House edition, and be informed of the changes made by DOJ to his department if Elon Musk considers it necessary. Asked whether this decision changed any previous decision, President Trump smiled and declared that it didn't, but that it gave him the chance of calling him Little Marco. Secretary Rubio thanked him for the gesture from the Maldives. Senator Schumer to start anger management therapy after his bold threat of sending a strong letter to President Trump. Democratic Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer will have to start anger management therapy as his threat to send a strong letter to President Trump was considered too aggressive by DNC Chair Ken Martin. Our approval has been falling because voters fear we might be too uncivil at some time in the future. If we don't send them a clear signal that we will keep caving to Republicans in the name of bipartisanship, they might never vote for us again, added Chair Martin. C. MSNBC is next media network to cave to President Trump. To atone for Trump's perceived grievances, MSNBC will have to purchase an undisclosed amount of $Trump meme coins, and host Chris Hayes will present the special 32 Days to the Rapture. The special will include segments featuring 1. Senator Schumer's strong letter, 2. Revised predictions of precisely when and in what swing states Jesus will come to get out the vote for the Republican Party, 3. Trailer of Reverend John Hagee's new Left Behind movie, 4. Testimonies of televangelists where they confirm that President Trump, not Jesus Christ, will sit at God's right. Confirm that Stormy Daniels is playing the role of Mary Magdalene in Luke's chapter 25's prophecy that declares that Trump is the new Messiah that will make America great, and that Jesus Christ will come later as his aide. D. Former President Biden's dog commander could find asylum in Canada's embassy after weeks of being tracked by the FBI. As President Trump revoked the pardon granted by his predecessor, the FBI had been hunting him down across the nation to make him accountable for 5 bodies buried in the White House's gardens. President Biden's lawyer claims commander's pardon was valid, and all evidence says that at least 2 of the bodies were victims of the president's sons Don Jr. and Eric, who have also been granted pardons. After years of indescribable horror due to Putin's threats, which forced them to appease him in the war in Ukraine and harm their own countries, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and former President Biden still have nightmares about the Russian dictator. In the case of the former American president, off-the-record sources declared that the condition was worsened by top national security advisor Jake Sullivan, who had fun frightening Mr. Biden with stories about escalation. Approached by reporters inquiring if this would affect his spot in the 2028 Harris-Biden ticket, Senator Schumer emphatically denied the rumors. It's precisely that which makes him an authentic Democrat. Asked whether Democrats would not benefit more with somebody stronger, like FDR, the senator declared, "No, FDR was a myth. He was not real, just a tale. He never existed. Never." President Biden once more caught trying to start his second term as he tried to sneak into the White House through the entrance for tourists. A security officer declared off the record that this was the 4th time this had happened. "We have talked to his relatives, but they say that Mr. Biden is dead set convinced of his victory and that he beat Medicare. We have warned them that we have a restraining order already and that we will have to go to a judge if they don't do something about this issue." Former President Biden convokes press conference in his residence to announce his first decision for his second term, which would consist of declaring a Memorial Day to honor his uncle eaten by cannibals and his own victory over Medicare. With Senator Schumer and DNC Chair Ken Martin in attendance, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries declared that change was coming and that this was an excellent way to start the 2028 campaign for the ticket Harris-Biden. Ocasio-Cortez and the Squad decide platform for Ocasio-Cortez's run in 2028 presidential primaries. After days of negotiations, New York Representative Ocasio-Cortez and the other members of the Squad agreed on the points that will spearhead her campaign in the upcoming presidential primaries. 1. The child tax credit will be increased to $5,000, but male beneficiaries will have to prove they have used the Amelia Perez toxic masculinity deconstruction method. If male beneficiaries can't afford the surgery, the federal government will pay for it in the hospital of their choice. 2. Offensive statues will be removed from public places according to a list Black Lives Matter will provide at the end of every fiscal year. 3. Every woke activist will be secured a position as DAI executive or consultant in her administration. Asked about whether Bernie Sanders agreed with the platform, the New York representative declared that he had been removed from the party because he kept talking about money in politics, the Voting Rights Act, unionization, minimum wage, and other boring stuff. He kept talking about oligarchy instead of the patriarchy, so we had to get rid of him, added Representative Rashida Tlaib, also a member of the Squad. Tariff Czar Peter Navarro and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, dismissing Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's fears, are preparing a new assessment of the economy based on alternative facts, after dismissing the unfounded fears sown by Bessent in President Trump. According to this assessment, 1. The economy is great. The economy is beautiful. 2. Only MAGA members will be able to perform the jobs of the future. I must be clear on this. Being a MAGA supporter won't be enough. You must be core MAGA to be able to perform these jobs, added Navarro. 3. Tariffs are great and all countries love them, even China. 4. Immigrants are evil and all countries hate them, even China. 5. Ukraine, understanding that Mr. Zelensky is evil, will embrace President Trump's leadership and accept Putin's choice for their next president. This will start a new century of prosperity for everybody. 6. The working class will be happy to invest their retirements in dollar Trump meme coins. And even workers from foreign countries will demand them, but American workers will have priority. 7. There will never again be recessions or inflation, and everybody will be happy when Trump starts his third term. This will start God's kingdom on earth. After Supreme Court validates the use of doctored photographs using Photoshop as evidence in the Abrego Garcia case, President Trump starts his 2028 campaign doing the same to the foreheads of his likely opponents with words that will remind voters why they didn't vote for them in 2024. Approached by reporters, Senator Schumer declared that he has disagreed with President Trump in another strong letter, especially the part that requires tattooing or branding such words in their actual foreheads, but that, as a Democrat, he will abide by Trump's executive decision because it was his duty to cave to Republicans. Man who stole a cop car while awaiting trial for stealing another cop car joins the Republican Party. Daniel Barton, 34, from Wisconsin, declared that I stole them cop cars because it was my sincere religious belief and because I'm a patriot. His lawyer declared that Barton, as in the case of Jack R. Blank, a man from Adams County, Illinois who, after invoking the sincere religious belief defense used by the January 6 riot defendants, was awarded $100,000 by Adams County, his client has also been awarded a similar amount and that, as in Blank's case, the arresting officers have been put on administrative leave and will have to go through religious sensitivity training.
This has been the news of this hour. Sponsored by Church of the Holy Redeemer's Power in the Spirit. Have you accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Savior? Did you vote for Trump in 2016 and then in 2020? This is the right church for you. If so, Church of the Holy Redeemer's Power in the Spirit is the only Christian church that can promise you in the Lord to have 72 virgins in heaven for only a donation of $50 a month. You will have access to those 72 virgins in heaven. For an additional $25, you will be allowed to replace 10 of them, and for $100, Heaven Premium, you will be allowed to choose them for yourself. Guaranteed, if you're not satisfied with those 72 virgins after you die, full refund of your money. We accept Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover.